Alright class, this is Miss Rickens coming to you from Starbucks recording this video, and hopefully this video won't be too long because we're talking about correspondence and congruence, which you all pretty much have a good idea and understanding of. So let's take a look at two figures. Here we have two quadrilaterals, and actually they're trapezoids to be more specific, but we're going to see which sides and angles correspond to one another. So if I were to take this one and change the orientation of this trapezoid so it would match the orientation of the black trapezoid and place it on top of the other trapezoid, I can see that they are related in some sense, that the angles are related to one another. So over here I can see that O corresponds to point O corresponds to point X, point L corresponds to point W, point M corresponds to point Z, and point N corresponds to point Y. Well, since the points correspond, and also that the angles do correspond in that same way. Angle O corresponds to angle X, angle L corresponds to angle W, angle M corresponds to angle Z, and angle N corresponds to angle Y. So even as I move this shape around, it still corresponds no matter the orientation, because when they face them so that they have the same orientation, it seems like these two relationships match up. The noise, because like I said, I'm over here at Starbucks. Okay, so not only in this case do the angles correspond to one another, but as you can see as we move them around, the angles are also, the relationship between the corresponding angles is that they are congruent. Angle X is congruent to angle O, angle L is congruent with angle W, angle M is congruent with angle Z, and angle Y is congruent with angle N. Now let's see, does that relationship hold also for the corresponding side? So first we can see that side ON corresponds with side XY. These two sides correspond to each other. And NM corresponds with side YZ, and side ML corresponds with side ZW, and side LO corresponds with side WX. And are these corresponding sides congruent to each other? As you can see, no, they're not congruent. So correspondence doesn't necessarily mean congruent. Corresponding does not necessarily mean congruence. It just so happened that in the case of these corresponding figures, the corresponding angles were congruent, but as we can see here that the corresponding sides are not congruent. So let's take a look at an example of congruent figures where corresponding parts are also congruent. Let me reiterate, we're talking about corresponding parts, we're talking about sides and angles. So let's take a look at this figure right here. As we can see here, we have two other quadrilaterals. And to figure out which parts are corresponding to which parts, I always start with the angles. And the angles help me out here. So let's take a look here. If I start over here with angle O, and I were to move this figure so that it matches up the orientation with the green figure, I can see that angle O corresponds to angle X. Angle L will correspond with angle W. Angle M will correspond with angle Z, and angle N corresponds with angle Y. And as you can see, as I change the orientation of it, you can see that they does match up. Well, not only are the angles corresponding, but as you can see that the angles are also congruent. As angle O fits entirely on angle X, angle L fits entirely on angle M fits entirely on angle Z, and angle N fits entirely on angle Y. Now let's look at the sides and see if which are the corresponding sides, and also if the corresponding sides are congruent. Okay, as you can see that ON corresponds, this is O, ON corresponds with XY, NM corresponds with YZ, ML corresponds with ZW, and LO, this one corresponds with WX. So these sides are corresponding to one another, but what you can also see is that these sides are also congruent to one another. So side ON is congruent to side XY, side NM or MN is congruent with side YZ, side ML, which is this one, is congruent with side ZW, and side LO, which is this side, is congruent with side WX. So now we can see that not only are the corresponding angles congruent to each other, but the corresponding sides are congruent to each other. And if we can prove that all pairs of corresponding angles are congruent to each other and all pairs of corresponding sides are congruent, then we can prove that the two figures or shapes are congruent to one another. So that's important to note. It's not just one thing for the figures to look congruent. We have to be able to prove it congruent by proving that all pairs of corresponding angles are congruent to each other and all pairs of corresponding sides are congruent to each other. And then we can say that the figures are congruent. But the key phrase to look for is all pairs of corresponding sides and all pairs of corresponding angles have to be shown to be congruent. One question is, how can you show that sides are congruent or angles are congruent if you don't have a measuring tool? Well, sometimes they will give you that information. As you can see, these two figures, they appear to look congruent, but we have these extra markings to confirm certain things. So if we take a look at these markings, we can see that angle A is congruent to angle D because they both have one arc marking, so that means they tell us that these angles are congruent. Angle C is congruent with angle F because they have an arc with two dashes, which means that they're congruent. And angle B, which corresponds to angle E, is also congruent because they both have an arc with three dashes. So we can see that all pairs of corresponding angles are congruent. Let's see if that's the same for the pairs of corresponding sides. So side BC has one dash, and FE has one dash, so they correspond to each other and are congruent. Side AB has two dashes, side ED has two dashes, which means those sides are congruent. And side AC has three dashes, and side FD is congruent. So those three sides are. Even though they didn't tell us any angle measurements or they didn't tell us any side measurements, we can still prove that these triangles are congruent because based on the markings of the picture, they have shown to us that all pairs of corresponding sides are congruent and all pairs of corresponding angles are congruent. So we can say that the triangles are congruent to each other. Now remember, the congruent symbol looks like an equals with two symbols. When we say corresponding, and the reason why corresponding is important is because there are 6 ways to represent that these triangles are congruent. There is this format, triangle ACB is congruent. Okay, so as you can see here, that this orientation has ACB first. Well, if you see ACB is this order, and DFE is this order. So as long as they correspond, the letters correspond to one another, we're good to go. Okay, so that's one way to write that these two triangles are congruent. Here's another way to. So here we have triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, and as long as the corresponding sides correspond to one another, we're good to go. So as you can see here, A still corresponds with D. It's the second position. B corresponds with E, and C corresponds with F. So this is a true statement as well. Let's take a look at another statement. So here we have triangle BCA is congruent to triangle EFD. So let's see, does B, the first letter in each of these triangles, correspond and are congruent? Yes. The second letters, are they corresponding and they congruent? Yes. And the third letters, are they corresponding and congruent? Yes. So actually we have several different ways to show that triangles are congruent. And in fact, in this case, we have 6 different statements. And for the interest of time, we won't go over all 6. But just be sure to understand that that's the case, that there's more than one way to describe that triangles are congruent. And here's another way. I forgot the triangles on there. My bad. Here, that might help it out as well. So any of these ways is correct. Now, which way is ideal? Well, I like to place the letters of the first shape in alphabetical order. So that would mean that this would be the way I represent it. But any of these ways is correct, but it makes it easier for me if the letters of the first shape are in alphabetical order. But they don't have to be. Okay? So that's it, you guys.